Okay, I see everyone is joining. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the second deep dive webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you. We have few people. Okay, coming in. Oh, okay, now I see most of you are connected. Okay, great. Before starting the webinar, I just want to flag something to make sure everybody's engaged and everybody can use the interpretation. So this webinar is being interpreted into Spanish, French, and Portuguese. My colleague Pavel will post a guide here for you. And as you can see a globe icon on the Zoom toolbar underneath. So go there, select the language of your preference, and you can listen either in French, Spanish, or Portuguese. I would like to say thank you so much for Eloisa, Lara, Noor, Jordana, and Sylvia for providing us this service today. Thank you all so much. So if you also want to listen or to participate in different language, we have translation captions. So you can go ahead and choose a language of your preference. So thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Lydia Mbakombeyena. I am the Learning and Partnership Specialist for the Youth for Climate Initiative at UNDP Rome Center. And thank you all again. And this webinar is also being recorded in case you would like to go back and refer back to it in the next 72 days before the call for solution is closed. And if you haven't get the chance to participate in the first webinar, we also have the recording for that. You have been asking a lot via email, so you can go ahead and watch the recording from the first session. So as you know, and as it has been mentioned on our platform, these deep dive webinars are designed for you to guide you in understanding application process of the call for solutions, understand the templates, and also to learn more about key principles of project proposal development and to introduce you to our new call for solution thematic areas. And in our first webinar on last Wednesday, we provided a complete guideline, a complete guide on how to apply for the call for solutions. And as you all know, the call for solution is an innovative challenge that aims to fund new and existing user-led solutions that are ready to be implemented or scaled, and to also support you further develop your ideas and projects by providing relevant learning opportunities with the support of our partners, such as this kind of webinars. And in addition to these deep dive webinars, this series, we have other means of support that are that have been constructed for you. The first one is our FAQ page, which means frequently asked questions page on the Youth for Climate platform. So we have posted some answers to most of the frequently asked questions by applicants, and we have posted it on the Youth for Climate platform. So please go ahead and see the FAQ page. And in case if you didn't, if your question is not answered, you could also post your question there. The second support we're going to provide in April will be a one-to-one mentorship with an expert to actually look at your work plan, your drafted work planning budget, and give you an advice to support you enhance it even better. So stay tuned on our platform to get all these updates regarding the call. And today's webinar is actually one of the most important ones. And so I suggest you bring your pen and notepads and put it next to you. I will do the same because this is a really educative, one of our most educative webinars, and you will be able to learn how to develop your proposal. So by attending this webinar, we hope you will be able to understand how to design an effective work plan and budget based on the templates provided for you on the call for solution guidelines and template page. So you will also be able to, you will also learn how to integrate communication and monitoring evaluation to your project design. So as you all know, the application form, you will be on the application form, you will be asked to attach this template, a complete template of this. So today's session will really help you understand and get ready to work on the work planning budget template. So hopefully this session is going to be very helpful for you. So to give you a little bit of introduction about the speakers today, we have Carlota Silvio, an Associate Program Officer of the Development and Investment Program at the International Training Center of the International Labour Organization, or ITCILO for short, and coordinator at Integro, the Global Competence Development Facility for future leaders in the world of work of ITCILO. Carlota will be speaking to us about project proposal development. So thank you, Carlota, for making the time and for being here for the Youth for Climate community. And we also have our own Malak Shabar here with us today, and she will be guiding us on the communications. Malak Shabar is a communication and project analyst. She's overseeing the communication strategy for the UNDP Rome Center for Climate Action and Energy Transition. Malak has honed her expertise through a range of experience working with startups on civic engagement initiative to managing communication projects for NGOs focused on poverty relief and inclusion in Mauritania. So yeah, today we have two strong women with us with expertise in project development and communications. So thank you both so much. And right after the presentations, we will receive your questions and we will try to answer them. And it's yeah, we will collect it through the Q&A. And I think you can see a Q&A option on your Zoom toolbar. So or you could also put it on the chat box, and we will collect all the questions from there. So speaking of questions, today's session is about project proposal development and communication strategy. So any question related to call eligibility and application process will not be answered today. So if you have any questions regarding the core guidelines and application process, please go to the FAQ page and you can ask your questions there if they are not answered already. So without further ado, I'm going to give it to Carlota. Thank you, Carlota, for joining us. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening and good morning, depending on where you're connecting from. I'm really impressed by the level of engagement we're getting in the Zoom chat. Just as a heads up, I will not be monitoring the chat as I speak. However, I am more than happy should UNDP Rome colleagues want to bring my attention to any of the questions. I will be happy to answer a few at the end of the presentation. Thank you for the hearts and the likes and applauses. I'm very happy to meet all of you. I'm delighted to be rejoining the Youth for Climate Explainer sessions for this year. And in this regard, I want to thank Roxani, Lydia, Malak, Pavel, and the rest of the team for creating space for a project session entirely dedicated to how to develop a project proposal. And together today, we will be looking at what is work planning, how to budget effectively for your submission. And we're also going to be looking into monitoring and evaluation, or M&E for short. I am Carlota Clivio. Thank you, Lydia, for kindly introducing me. Development Investment Program part of staff. I am an Associate Program Officer. I also coordinate Integro, which, as kindly reminded, is the Global Competency Development Facility of the ITCILO for future leaders in the world of work. I mostly work with young people like you all are, undergraduate, graduate students at universities and young professionals that want to pivot their career and the trajectory of their professional life more closely toward the mandate, mission, and vision, not just of the International Labour Organization, but of the United Nations and their ecosystem at large. I am proud for all of you connecting today. Well done for wanting to embark on a new journey that will take you through the development of a project for sustainable impact. I start from the assumption here that the change that you wish to engender with this project is sustainable, it's positive, and it's directly benefiting the communities you have selected to serve with this project. So presumably you're connecting with us to leave a mark within your community of reference that could be local, could be national, regional, or even global. And you want to make a difference for the better. So this should be celebrated. And I am very pleased to see that so many of you are interested in the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions. I also start from the assumption that if you are connecting today, you're sort of ready to get started on your project, and you may have already perhaps carried out analysis that are complete and are enabling you to understand your context of departure. I've mentioned a local context, a national context, a regional context. It doesn't matter what is the scope of your intervention. Perhaps you have already conducted a needs assessment that tells you and your team very clearly where the intervention is needed the most. I also assume that you have already identified a core development challenge or problem that you have decided that you'll be directly addressing with your sustainable solution. Also, that could be very beneficial for project design. You have already made an initial selection of available strategies. You have vetted them, you have discussed them with the community that is going to be directly affected by your project. You have discussed it with your team in case you are indeed working with a team. And you have reached consensus over which best possible strategy is available to you for the purposes of the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions. If you're not here yet, please do not worry. I trust you have ample time to also address these three components that I'm mentioning here. But ideally, the moment where work planning starts is after these three things have been done on your part, whether you're working as an individual or as part of a team. I'm also aware that on Wednesday you were introduced to what I like to call the rules of the game of the Youth for Climate Calls for Solutions. Namely, you know that for this project, you're going to be budgeting in US dollars and no other currency. You're going to be budgeting for a maximum of 30,000 US dollars. And you are also considering to submit a proposal and a detailed work plan that doesn't extend beyond 24 months. I think this should be the very fundamental starting point of any of the project documents that you are going to be submitting and filling in for the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions. The rules of the game are a little bit more than these, and you have attended a webinar on this already, but it's just important to re-emphasize what absolutely cannot be missed from your oversight. Let's start from work planning, shall we? Now, I'm wondering how many of you within the audience, and you can give me a reaction, I see all of your reactions coming up, are already familiar with the language of work planning. Maybe you have encountered it in previous iterations, maybe of the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions, or perhaps you have already seen it in other contexts of your professional life, outside of the United Nations even. So these are the terms that you may have come across already: inputs and activities, outputs, outcomes and impact. It's almost as if all organs involved in international development use this as sort of a common language that everyone is expected to be speaking. You know that inputs and activities and outputs are actually part of what I like to call a sphere of project control. Indeed, for the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions, you are aiming to achieve the goal of obtaining 30,000 US dollars, which we consider an input, a resource that you will directly use for the benefit of your project development. You are familiar with activities that are going to be actions taken or work performed through which inputs, again, the 30,000 USD, will be mobilized to produce specific outputs. And outputs, last but not least, you can see as the result of a different set of activities that you put into action and that enable you to achieve something, to change something. This could be the change resulting from the intervention. So this is very much within the sphere of project control. A little bit on the outer corners of the sphere of project control, we have a sphere of project influence, as I like to call it. Here, the outcomes reign dominant. We have outcomes as final positive situations that will exist once your project has been completed in all of its components. So here you can sort of predict what is going to happen after you have implemented your proposal, especially after having conducted thorough needs assessments and after having done your due diligence and background homework. But here, the control you exert over a project starts to become a little bit more frazzled and a little bit outside of your control. What is definitely outside of your control, perhaps, is impact, the long-term changes in people's lives that will go well beyond the project timeline that the Youth for Climate Call for Solution gives you, that is of 24 months. So I'm very happy to report that thankfully you don't need to worry too much about impact in this instance when you are designing a project for this new 2025 Call for Solutions. However, you need to be perfectly attuned with what are the outputs and the outcomes that your project is going to be engendering. What you also need to be worried about is indicators and means of verification, which I'm aware are both requested as part of your application form, or rather the submission of the project proposal. So let's dive into what it is that is actually expected of you, which are the areas here that are marked in a heavier color. Now, a little bit of a working definition on what are indicators and means of verification. Indicators, I trust most of you come across every day, even just when reading a newspaper or some article that you're really interested in. Preferably even you as a reader of other people's projects or some article or some even scientific article, you tend to be preferring indicators that are numerical because they tell you a simple and reliable story that helps assess change connected to any project, including your own. So whenever you think about indicators, think about an easy, simple, reliable way to assess change, the change that your project is going to be delivering. Again, sustainable, positive, directly referring to the areas of competence within which you have to work for the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions. But nevertheless, again, preferably numerical. What about the means of verification? Means of verification are sources through which you obtain reliable data that can help prove that your project is on track for success. At this stage of project development, it is entirely possible that you will be mostly relying on secondary means of verification, rather secondary data. So data that has already been produced by other teams, by other UN institutions, by other research centers. When the project, your project, however, will have already been kickstarted, and maybe it will have been developing for a few months now, what you'll need to be using and carefully tending to is primary data. Data that you can obtain directly from the implementation of your project. And that's going to be extremely useful in the monitoring and evaluation phase. You'll see for yourself, you'll no longer at a certain point start relying on secondary data. You will only have primary data in your hands, a richness of useful resources, numerical data that you can use to tell the story about your project and how it's being implemented. So these are some of the things to also consider when submitting your project proposal design to the Youth for Climate Calls for Solutions. But now you may be wondering, Carlotta, that's a lot on my plate already. You may already feel some kind of a sense of overwhelm when you get to thinking about implementing a project. I'm here to give you an answer that points in the direction of a time-tested tool that you can use, and I would invite you to consider as being always at your disposal to control, in a sense, and manage this sense of overwhelm. And this is Gantt charts. I know, easy, predictable, but so reliable. They would always point you in the direction of planning, work planning that is reliable, that is very granular. You can get in a lot of detail with Gantt charts. And it's always a document that you can go back to, that you can revise as you move along. Because oftentimes things don't go exactly as planned. For instance, sometimes you have to consider lag time, maybe for recruitment of other people, staff hiring delays. You have a change of staff that you have to sort of deal with in a very short time span. Or maybe there is a delay in implementation of local policies that are enabling you to deliver your project. So these are some delays and some lag time that you can factor into your Gantt charts. Also, you may need to factor in some what it's called startup time, maybe 1 or 2 months, and that's the time you and your team, if you're working with a team, will need to get the ball rolling on the project implementation. So this is a very helpful tool. Of course, there are many, and if you have a time-trusted tool that you use and that you prefer from Gantt charts, you're more than welcome to let us know in the Zoom chat. However, this is magnificent for really holding us also accountable for what we do, but importantly, lower our sense of overwhelm in the face of design and implementation of a project. Now onto budgeting and resources. I'm sure most of you have already had to budget for a project, a program, something even, doesn't matter how small scale it was, but you've had already to come to terms with budgeting for something that you really trusted in and that you really were passionate about. You may have found yourself wanting to budget for bringing in some new people and form a team together with them, experts, officers, external collaborators and experts that you selected for the implementation of something that you wanted to build. Or maybe you were looking for material, just perhaps some very concrete substances that you needed, wood, glue, something very simple that you needed to bring about some intervention that you knew was very needed in the community of reference that you are in touch with. Equipment, more sort of heavier machinery type of stuff, or just components that you needed to put in place for project implementation, or subcontracts as identified here by perhaps even another partner or anyone in your team. So all of this you would need to account for in terms of general budgeting principles. However, in the interest of the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions, I would say that you always need to be very clear about the quantity of all of these things that you are budgeting in and for how long you will need them, or for how long you will need to work with certain people if you're looking into hiring new staff. Please be minded of the fact that only the costs of the project can be budgeted. So no third party involved unless otherwise stated in the call. You only need to budget for costs directly attributable to project activities. So to the best of your abilities, and I know this is difficult, but you have to try to not budget for funds or anything else that is outside of the project scope, because committing any one of these mistakes could jeopardize your sort of your chances of being selected at the end among the winners of the Call for Solutions this year. Also, anything that has happened prior to project implementation, please keep it out of project budgeting. Only really focus on you and your project and this 24 months timeline that you have been provided. Also, while budgeting, you'll have to make sure that you have the means to have expenditures that are kept traceable and accurately documented. This is very important for monitoring and evaluation and for any auditing that may happen well outside of the scope of this call for solutions. But ideally, we want for your projects to last a lot longer than 24 months, right? So it's good practice to start now, documenting everything in a clear, transparent, accurate manner. Oh, yes, this is also very important. Are you considering overhead costs? Overhead costs here that, again, will only need to be related to the project that you are going to be implementing. Please, again, don't think about the before, the after of your project implementation. If overhead costs are in the fold, really just focus on your project. Have you considered budgeting for contingencies in case of any risk materializing, whether natural or man-made, or just very simple contingencies that have to do with your internal management of the project implementation? And I'm very happy that we have Malak with us on board for this component. Are you budgeting also for communication? Ideally, you would want for a very concrete and very pristine and transparent communication campaign to go out communicating to the world the successes of your project. So are you accounting for it? Also for auditing and evaluation purposes, especially if you're going to be relying on experts and independent actors outside of your team, are you budgeting for them? Right. So that's also important to just write down and let the selection committee of Youth for Climate know. Now, onto monitoring evaluation. This comes a little bit later in your timeline, but it's nevertheless very important to start considering now for best results in the long term. Now, remember how we spoke about indicators? I've shown you these spheres of the project work planning, and I mentioned indicators as one of the things that you also need to be working on. They come in the most handy when you're going to be starting to monitor your project. The monitoring helps us unpack the following questions. And I would encourage you to take a snapshot of this slide. Keep these questions with you and go back to them whenever needed, because this is what you're going to be needing during monitoring. Again, it's best practice to start thinking about it now, well before project implementation. Monitoring helps you determine how your project has progressed, in which direction, and in any way, should you or can you course correct in a way that brings you closer to your initial goals. Sometimes our interventions have unintended consequences that we need to immediately course correct for. And although, yes, it's best to have a dedicated moment for monitoring, you guys as managers of the projects you want to implement, best start thinking about these things already now. You will have to, for monitoring purposes, really gather data and analyze information on actual progress, on the quality of stakeholder management. I like this one. Is everyone happy with your project? Your team, the communities you're servicing, the constituents and beneficiaries that you're directly addressing with your idea. Also, financial progress. This is very important. Are you ensuring the financial sustainability of your project in the longer term? Are you accounting for obstacles and risks? Hopefully, you have already done so in the work planning. But again, there's always some leeway, some margin of error, and it's best to course correct when you're going to be required to do so. For evaluation criteria, I like the OECD Development Assistance Committee template example. In evaluation, these are some of the more questions for you to keep in mind that again help you determine what is the direction that your project has been taking and whether it has embarked on a healthy pathway, or again, there's some things that could be better managed or better controlled for. You see so many new terms: relevance, effectiveness, impact we know already, efficiency, sustainability, and coherence. Well, I'm happy to report that they're very similar to things that we've already seen together, the work planning project areas that we have explored in my earlier slides. They're just different ways of, they're different aspects of all of the things we have already explored. So when the question is about relevance, you know that what you're being asked to evaluate is your inputs and activities and outputs. When you're asked about efficiency, how efficient were the individual activities that led your project to produce outputs? When we talk about effectiveness, you know for certain this is about outcomes. It's a broader level, higher level consideration that you're putting in, and it's about your sphere of project influence rather than your sphere of project control. Impact stays the same, even within the DAG template, and sustainability needs to be maintained across all areas of project work planning. So whenever you hear this taken directly from the DAC template, you know that it's a broader evaluation question about each and every single step of your project work planning. For many questions that could be very helpful to you, you can start from very descriptive questions or go into the normative. If you have an idea of where you want your project to go and you are more focused on the how should this project be rather than who did what and what was done, the normative questions are very powerful in monitoring and evaluation processes and can help you, again, lead the way for a future action. Cause and effect questions are also very powerful, granted that, yes, it's not as easy to determine the cause of every single effect that your project has produced, but to the maximum extent possible that you can control for this, ask yourself what difference has the project made, especially has it been positive and sustainable. For evaluation types, you can always evaluate and cluster your evaluations according to these areas that I want to really focus your attention on. It could be about time, it could be about persons involved, it could be about methods. So the researchers that are connected with us today, the academic types, will be very familiar with qualitative and quantitative and mixed methods used for evaluation types. And you can also decide that you cluster your findings according to focus. It can be a focus on a process or on outcome evaluations. This is, again, entirely up to you, but it's best to start thinking about this now. Now, I've used my 35 minutes as effectively as I could. However, if I was not effective enough and you still have a lot of questions, please do let me know. I'm happy to take a few. I'll stay connected for a bit longer. Lydia, you tell me if I can pass the floor directly to Malak, who has very important messages about strategy and communication for your project, or whether I should take questions now. Lydia, over to you.
Maybe I would like to, like, there are just few questions, so we make sure that they are answered before you leave, so I can ask them. So we had very interesting questions coming from participants. So one of them was, I think the one I can answer. One person asked on the Q&A, what is the required, is tax included on the budget? I think that's what I saw in the Q&A. And yes, you should include all costs related to your project in the budget. So you should, if there is any tax that you're expecting, make sure that it's included on the budget. And the question raised for you, Carlota, was what should I do if I do not have a second data, or I mean a baseline data, while I am applying for this call for solution? If I don't have any baseline data right now, what would you suggest I do? That's the first one.
That's interesting.
And, yeah, it is. And there is also one question that was asking about if you have any tips in relations to risk on a risk matrix, how do you suggest they should go about that? And that's the second one. And I'm also looking so I don't miss any questions. Okay, give me one moment. Okay, there is the baseline question, and I think, okay, you can answer these two. And yeah, let's start with these two, Carlota.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. I'd be happy if considered possible also by you and Roxani, perhaps share the floor on both questions, because there are some things that I can say. However, I do not know if then they're also fitting for your purposes within the call for solutions. So what I would say to the person asking about the secondary data, I would tell you two things. I will look one more time to make sure that there is absolutely no one in the world that has data on what you are intending to cover with your project. Just look once more. There must be an NGO, a local association. There must be someone gathering some form of data. It can be incomplete. You can consider it to be not sufficient, but there must be something already existing to give you a sense of where your project needs to go. Maybe you tell me, Carlota, I've checked so many times. I don't need to check one more time. That's fine. I will not ask you to look for more. Then I would say that you get ready to already start collecting some data on your own. Because if there really is nothing, it means the people that you need to speak to, your constituents, and the communities that you want to support with your project, you need to start talking to them already. The type of data you may gather at this perhaps initial stages of project planning and designing may be qualitative. I guess I don't know if 70 days would be enough to gather quantitative data, but you never know. I would perhaps start scheduling semi-structured interviews, provided that they're conducted ethically, of course, with the people that you need to support the most. Gather their responses, their sense of what intervention is needed and how your project can support them, and then can feed directly into your project design in ways that will be extremely impactful and beneficial for you, for your team, for the people you are cooperating for, working for. And I understand the frustration of not finding the data you need when you need it already available out in the open. I really do empathize with this. I wonder also how the Y4C team feels about this question. Importantly, you are going to be the ones receiving these project design proposals. Perhaps there have been instances in the past where secondary data was not available. If not, don't worry, but I assume you've gone through so many applications already that something similar to this question must have come up, and perhaps someone in the team would like to take the sort of the second part of this question.
I'm happy to come in, Carlota. Hi, everybody. This is Roxani, Youth for Climate Coordinator. Thanks so much for the great presentation, Carlota. I don't have too much to add, but while I add a few points, maybe you can start thinking about the answer to a third question, which was just if you could share an example of an activity, an output, an outcome, and an impact. That would be great. So on the question of data, yeah, excellent question. See also if you could maybe find some proxy data. So it might not be data immediately related to the specific kind of indicator you're trying to address, but you might be able to find proxy data about a related indicator that could give you a bit of an idea. Or you may just have qualitative data at this stage. What's important is if you don't have strong baseline data, maybe you should make it part of your project, right? In the initial stages, maybe you can integrate a part of the project that seeks to do some initial data collection, because by the end of the project, it will be difficult for you to be able to say, did I achieve my objectives if you don't have some kind of measure? On the other question on risk, yes, that's a question that we ask on the application form itself. So not in the work plan and budget template, but you'll find a question on the application form. And there we ask you to mention risks like social and environmental risks, financial risks, organizational risk, political risk. And it's important that you're open with evaluators about these risks and that you show that you have a good awareness of what the risks might be, because they might be able to see some risks. And if you're not acknowledging them yourself, maybe they'll wonder why, right? So what are some potential, there could always be some potential negative environmental risks, even in a project that is entirely targeting positive environmental impact, right? So that's one thing. On organizational risk. Perhaps there's a risk that one of the team members might leave during the project. So what could you do to be prepared for that scenario and avoid too many negative consequences on your project? So those are some of the kinds of things to think about, and the main message is just be open with the evaluators about these kinds of things. Back to you, Carlotta, unless Lydia would like to add any other questions that may have come in the meantime.
Thank you, Roxani. If I understand correctly, you were asking for more concrete examples about the language of work planning and the terms that I've shown to everyone connected today, and also a comment again on Lydia's question 2, which is about risk assessment. Is that correct?
Yes, the risk one. I think Roxani was also mentioning things on that. So if you have anything to add, please feel free, Carlotta.
Yes, I promise not to repeat what Roxani has already said. Again, think about yourself and your team, if one is involved, actually implementing the project. And consider if anything may happen along the way that, again, you need to inform UNDP Rome about, and the evaluators and the ones judging the quality of your project design. Here, I would say this. Let's imagine that you want to service a specific community that, however, you have very difficult access to. That already tells you something about risks involved in implementing your project. The risk is you not being able to actually service the people that you say need the intervention that you've designed. So how do you plan to account for that risk? And yes, of course, risk can also be smaller scale. They could come from perhaps a financial situation that you could be facing, or a change of staff situation that, again, when you think of risks, you don't have to go too far over, again, your direct sphere of project control and influence, but it's important to think of a few things. And those of you that have done this process of project work planning already know that it's important to be as transparent as possible with the people accessing this project design, reading it, evaluating it. I don't know if, Roxani, for the Youth for Climate Call for Solutions, you're asking them to make a calculation of impact over probability when it comes to risk assessment. But if not, even that is very much on the project designer's hands, let's say. So it's a number that you're required to give an estimate for. And I think it doesn't go beyond that. You just need to show awareness, that it's an educated awareness about your risk, and see already how you're going to be accounting for the kind of risk that you foresee. I think that already shows a high level of project development maturity that I'm sure the Y4C Call for Solutions team will feel confident in reading and learning from. Briefly on activities, I remember that some brilliant projects in the past few years were about climate education, for instance, right? So some of the previous participants to previous calls of Call for Solutions wanted to deliver training. And so they presumably one of your activities could be train X number of participants in my community on the theme of your selection, which could be environmental awareness or climate change awareness or nature-based solutions awareness. That is an activity. The outputs, again, it's an activity plus one activity plus another activity. And it could be maybe, again, we said that one activity is one workshop that you have created. An output could be 9 months of training completed on the importance of nature-based solutions for community ABC. So it tells us what is the change that it's going to come, the most immediate type of change that is going to come out of project implementation for you and your team. And the outcome is a little bit broader, and probably you are immediately asked about outcomes in your application to the call for solutions. And it's the final positive situation that will exist once your project has been not just implemented, but completed. So what happens at the end of these 24 months that you're given as a timeline for intervention? So I hope that clarifies things more. And Lydia, I'm happy to give you back the floor. Over.
Thank you so much, Carlota. Thank you for the presentation, for your responses. This means a lot for the Youth for Climate community and for all of us. Thank you. It was an amazing presentation. Now I'm going to give it over to Malak. So Malak, over to you without further ado.
Thank you. Let me just put up my slides. Okay, are you able to see my screen? Perfect. All right, great. Thank you so much, Carlota, for the presentation. It was super insightful. And hi, everyone. So I'm Malak, and I'm going to be talking to you about communication for your project. As you may be already aware, this is going to be part of the application. But also communication is extremely important in your project from the moment where you start with the idea and throughout the implementation phase. So we'll be looking at the storytelling and strategy for your project. But before doing that, I think we need to take a step back and really ask ourselves, what is communication? Right? Because a lot of times people think of communication, they think of telling something, right? Communicating, speaking to someone. But actually, communication is first and foremost listening. So you need to listen, but you need to listen to whom? You need to listen to your audience. You need to be very specific about what that audience is, and there isn't a size fits all. Of course, this will depend on your project. It can be smallhold farmers, it can be high school students, it can be university students, government institutions, etc., etc. So really try to define who it is that you want to reach with your communication for your project. And also, how do you need to listen to them? You need to listen actively. Why? Because what you want to do is that you want to understand your audience, and you want to understand their needs and values, their challenges and pain points. What is it that keeps them up at night? What is it that is blocking them? And their motivation. What is it that actually brings them to take action? And once you have done that, you want to understand your own goals, right? What is it that you want to achieve with your communication, with your project? Is it that you want to increase awareness about an issue? Is it that you want to increase engagement with an issue, etc.? By when do you want to achieve that goal? And why do you want to achieve that goal? How is it helping your project? Now, once you have these two elements, here comes the key moment, I'd say, which is you want to connect between both of them. So you have your audience's needs and values, and you know what you want to achieve, you know what your goals are. These two elements will help you craft some key messages that will direct your communication, key messages where you actually showing what solution you're bringing with your project in a way that resonates with the values, with the ideals of your target community, your target audience, right? And why do you want to do that? Because you want to create relationships. You want to create trust. And trust is something that is going to take you the long way with your project. So in a nutshell, communication is about connecting. engaging, and inspiring action by effectively sharing messages that resonate with your audience, build trust, and drive meaningful outcome. Now, you might be wondering, great, Malak, we understand what it is, but why should I even care about communication? And in order to kind of convince you, I first want to play a little game. So if you look at this, some of you probably recognize it. This is the logo of the UN. And when I say UN or when I say United Nations, what is it that comes to mind? Feel free to drop it in the chat. I can't spend too much time on this as I'm aware that we're limited on time. So I'm going to go directly and show you what results I got with another pool of participants that we put together in a word cloud. So as you can see here, we see values, ideas, concepts, right? So responsibility, hope, integrity, dignity, resilience. These are all concepts or ideas. They're not actually telling me what the UN is doing. They're telling me what values are linked to them. And this is what I want to get to. With your project, if you have no communication, or let's say a bad communication, then at the end of the day, you're only going to be delivering a product or a service. And God knows there are a lot of products and services out there, and probably something that's similar to yours. So if your audience at some point finds a better offer, they're just going to go for it. Now, if you have effective communication, what you do here is that you create a symbol. Your project becomes a symbol of ideas and feelings that, if done well, the communication, these ideas and feelings will resonate with the target audience. It will create a relationship between them, between this community and you, and they will trust you, and it will be more difficult for them to leave you. So it's going to help you with your project. Now, I also want to share a bit of a campaign that I find really interesting from this clothing company that I will not name, that really focuses on sustainability, circular economy, etc. And this campaign, it's a clothing company. Usually when you try to sell a product or a piece of clothing, you're going to say, okay, you need to buy this jacket because it has XYZ features, right? What they did is different. They said, they have this jacket and they said, don't buy this jacket. So this paradoxical message was actually promoting sustainable consumption, really inviting the community to follow principles of circular economy, etc., recycling, blah, blah, blah. Now, this particular company that I'm talking about right here has for main target audience an eco-friendly, eco-conscious audience. And when they saw that this clothing company actually was supporting the same ideals as them, this created a stronger bond with the entity, with the brand, and also built loyalty, which meant better performance, let's say, for the company long term. Now, you might be thinking, okay, great, communication is good. How do I implement an effective communication for my project? And we can actually break it down into two sections. So we'll have a look at the theory, which is the storytelling, and then the practice, so the strategy. Let's start with the storytelling. Now, why should we tell stories? As far as I can remember, I mean, in human history, let's say, we've always been telling stories. It's really part of being human, I would say. And if they've been used for so long, it means that something was working. So the reason why we tell stories is because they're first memorable. Think back to a time when someone just shared data with you. Did it really stick with you? Probably for an hour, maybe more. But then remember a time when someone told you about a story that really stirred your emotions. That story is probably still in your head. So people tend to forget data, but they remember a good story because it creates that emotional connection that helps people relate to the problem. It also helps you put a face on a development. When you humanize something, it makes it more relatable and you remember it more. And I'm not the only one saying this. There's scientific research that has proved that when people are being told a story, there are certain parts in the brain that activate and that make you remember it more. I won't go into the details, but I thought it was interesting to share it. And of course, you can go back and have a look at it if you're interested later on. Now, what pattern does a story usually have? It starts with a setting, then you have the characters, the conflict, the climax, and then the resolution. And to give you an example, I just want to take that of Greta Thunberg. You can like her, you can dislike her. It doesn't matter here, we're just taking an example. So here we have a school student that realized that there was an issue, which is the climate crisis. She started with school strikes that then developed into a global movement that then, which is the climax, well, it didn't actually solve the climate crisis, obviously, but it got us to a certain type of resolution, which is a wider awareness on the issue. And now, before I ask Roxani to share the video, I just wanted to show you something. So as you may be aware, you are going to have to submit a 3-minute video. And I just want to stress that this video is super important because throughout the application process, you will have noticed that it's quite technical, right? There's also going to be communication strategy, and we'll cover that, the technical aspect, later on. But there's also the video, and the video is the only moment in which you can talk directly to us, in which you can tell us your story. And this is the moment where I really encourage you to explain why you want to work on this project. How did the inspiration come? How did the idea come? Where are you going to work on it? What do you want to do with your project? And why do you actually need Youth for Climate support to actually get to that, that result that you are aiming for? And I'm going to show you a video from an awardee from last year, who actually, who's from Colombia, who made a beautiful video, just to give you a bit of inspiration. So, Roxani, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if you want to share the video.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos y bienvenidas a la Casa Cultural Somos por Naturaleza. Estamos aquí en el barrio Manrique La Honda, en el borde urbano-rural de la Comuna 3 Manrique, en la ciudad de Medellín. Este centro cultural abrió las puertas a la comunidad de La Honda y a toda la alta ladera de la costa nororiental de la ciudad hace 3 años. Trabajamos con niñas, niños y adolescentes, jóvenes y mujeres del barrio con un propósito: generar espacios comunitarios, formativos, pedagógicos y culturales para aportar a la generación de capacidades para que la comunidad de este barrio pueda superar las diferentes situaciones de pobreza y prevenir las violencias existentes hoy en las altas laderas de la ciudad de Medellín.
La Honda es un barrio autoconstruido por sus habitantes sobre zonas de riesgo no mitigables en la alta ladera de la ciudad. Por sus condiciones geográficas, es zona de influencia de posibles desastres naturales como avenidas torrenciales, caída de rocas o grandes deslizamientos. Estos riesgos aumentan con la temporada de lluvias torrenciales. Al ser una zona altamente poblada y un territorio receptor de migrantes y personas desplazadas por la violencia interna de Colombia, La Honda se ha construido de acuerdo a las necesidades inmediatas de la población y con los pocos recursos disponibles. La presencia del gobierno local es poca y el barrio no cuenta con un sistema de gestión para estos riesgos, haciendo de esta comunidad primera línea de afectados por el cambio climático. Otras situaciones presentes en el barrio intensifican la problemática: la deficiencia del sistema de gestión de residuos sólidos, la falta de sistemas de conducción de aguas lluvias y alcantarillado, la informalidad de las viviendas y las vías y el rápido crecimiento demográfico. Nuestra solución para trabajar con la comunidad esta problemática cuenta con 3 fases de implementación. 1. Una cartografía social y medioambiental del barrio realizada con líderes y con expertos para detectar los riesgos ambientales del territorio y sus zonas de influencia. 2. La creación de un sistema comunitario de gestión del riesgo que contenga un censo, un proceso de formación a líderes y la creación de canales de comunicación y organización de los habitantes del barrio con rutas de acción claras en caso de desastres ambientales. 3. Pilotos de pequeñas intervenciones urbanísticas en puntos críticos del barrio donde se estanquen las aguas lluvias para prevenir que el estancamiento cause deslizamientos. Todo este proceso estará transversalizado por espacios de formación que dejen la capacidad instalada necesaria para que la comunidad lidere de manera sostenible el sistema de gestión del riesgo. Después de la intervención, queremos ver un sistema de gestión del riesgo funcionando con canales de comunicación claros y abiertos que le permita a la comunidad estar informada, activamente capacitándose y creando planes de contingencia en caso de emergencias. También la reducción de accidentes y riesgos causados por el deslizamiento de las quebradas y la reducción en el número de familias que deben salir del barrio por razones climáticas.
All right. Great, thank you. Let me put back my slides. All right. Second. Oh. All right. So as you might have seen, it was kind of pretty well done with the storyline and everything. A few tips maybe on the video as well. If you are working with a team, try to get your team as well to talk on the video. It's a group work. It'd be nice to have their opinion as well. If you have already started your project and you have some testimonials, maybe show those as well, of course, with their consent. If you know where you're going to be implementing the project, show us the location. Let us feel as if we are there as well. And I know for some cases, it might not be easy to do so, or maybe there isn't a project yet, but if you can show, use some footage from another source and give us the photo or video credits as well, I think that would be good. But yeah, enough for the video and storytelling. Let's move to the communication strategy. So the practical aspect of communication. And I'm going to need your full attention on this one because it's really, really important for your whole communication. So first step for a good communication strategy is for you to set up goals. Remember the goals we mentioned at the beginning? These are the same ones. These goals need to be SMART, meaning they need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be achievable, they need to be relevant, and they need to be time-bound. So if I give you an example, it could be increase reach by 30% in 3 months. I'm trying to respect all of those elements. So they need to be very specific. Second element, and I cannot stress this enough, is define your audience. If you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. So really try to define the group or the community that you want to communicate with. And one thing that can really help you in defining who you're communicating with is personas. Personas are these semi-fictional profiles where that kind of represents an individual from the target audience that you are aiming for. So a persona could be, for example, Jessica, right? So just a random name, who lives in, I don't know, Uganda, and you give her age, her gender, so basic demographics, her income, her goals and inspirations, and aspirations, sorry, the challenges and pain points, and also the challenges and pain points that you can solve with your project, the values and beliefs, the behavior, the possible objections, so that you're ready to counter those as well. The communication channels, where is she or where can you find your audience? I'll get back to this in a minute. And the personality traits. And always try to keep this persona always by you so that it can help you steer your communication, and also try to update it as you test your communication. Communication is all about trial and error. So it's always good to get back and see what performs well, what works, and how you can perfect your personas and everything else. So point 3, set your key messages, right? The key messages which come from this connection between your audience's values and your goals. So what do you want your audience to take away? How can you say that in a way that kind of makes it relatable for them? Branding. This is something that is overlooked a lot of times, but it's really important. Branding is the way you appear to your audience. Do you want to appear serious? Is that something that would work in your case, or do you need to appear in a way that is more fun, that is more approachable? And so for that, you need to define the logo for your project, for your entity, the color palette, the tone of voice, the slogans, etc. One thing that is important here is that once you set your branding, stay consistent. Don't go changing it all the time, because otherwise it will confuse your audience. Point 4, select the right channels and formats, right? So channels is what we talked about earlier. Where am I going to find my audience? Where do they spend their time? Where am I going to be able to reach them? So this can be social media. Even then, social media, is it Facebook? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? Is it LinkedIn or X, Twitter? So really try to define that. Is it in news outlets? Should they read the news? Should I write an article and pitch it to the local news outlet? Is it in events? Should I organize an event, or should I attend an event? Should I organize a workshop? Maybe. Is it emails, newsletters, etc., podcasts maybe, or websites? In any case, I think I would encourage everyone to actually have a website. It's kind of this place where you can showcase your work and create the right connections. And also, what type of content resonates? So once you have the channels, but once you know where you need to communicate, you need to know how you want to communicate. Is your audience responding better to videos, maybe short videos, long videos? Are they responding better to infographics, or maybe to blog posts, or news articles? Audio bites. Try to define which one works, and there is no size fits all. Obviously, you're going to have to test these things out. You're going to have to see how they perform. And also, another way of understanding what to go for is to see the competition. Is there another entity that is doing more or less the same thing as you? And what are they doing that actually works for them? Try to copy what they're doing that is working, add into it your own little flavor, obviously, and try to see as well, what is it that isn't working for them, right? To avoid doing the same thing. Now, I've added at the top here on the slide a mini toolbox with some tools that can help you in content creation. They have free versions, but obviously the paid versions give you more flexibility, but we'll talk about budgeting later on. Point 5, create a content calendar. So what's a content calendar? It's a calendar that can be weekly, monthly, yearly, where you outline when you're going to put out certain communication products, right? You can align them with certain international days, certain events, etc., and when you're going to actually set up a communication campaign. This is important to have at hand and to follow and to respect, because this is going to allow you to plan ahead and to make sure that you're consistent in your communication, that there's this frequency in communication. You don't want to be putting something out there for your audience one day and then waiting 1 month or 2 months and then popping up again and expecting people to actually remember you or interact with you. Communication is a lot about consistency. It's like with people, right? If you want to make a friend, you need to show that there's that effort to communicate with them consistently. That way you can build trust. If you don't do that, there is no trust, and they're probably not going to be there to support your project. Point 6, monitoring and evaluation. This is important. Many times people they do everything right. They get their key messages, the content planning, they create their content products, they put them out there, and then they're happy. But no, it doesn't end there. You need to evaluate. You need to see how that content performed. You need to see KPIs, so key performance indicators, to actually document your communication strategy, to see how you can perfect it, how you can tweak it, and how you can keep the things that work and eliminate the things that do not work. And I did put here some tools that you can use. So Google Analytics for your website, Meta Business Suite or Hootsuite for social media, etc. SimilarWeb. There are other tools out there, obviously, but I really try to really evaluate and go back and see the performance of your communication strategy. All right. Now for budgeting. comms needs a budget. First of all, it needs a budget because you're going to need it for content creation, for events, for social media promotion, for paid ads, so be it on social media or website. So Google Ads, for example, for website design for website management. Maybe you need to recruit someone that's going to manage this aspect of your project, so the whole comms. And you can have the most perfect communication strategy, but if you don't have a budget for it, then it doesn't matter, then it's not going to work. So how do you actually budget for it? One approach that I really like and that I think is quite effective is the objectives and tasks approach. And how does it work? You first start by defining your communication objectives or goals. We've mentioned these over and over through the whole presentation. So, for example, increase awareness for your climate project, etc. Then you list the tasks to achieve each objective, right? What is it that you need to do to actually get to that goal? Maybe it's design social media campaigns, host a community workshop, physical or online, create educational videos, blah, blah, blah. And then you estimate the costs for each task. Do you need to take into account the design tools, the video editing software? Maybe you need to hire a photographer. Maybe you need to hire someone to do communication or social media or write the articles, etc. So the copywriting. Maybe you want to run some ads, right? Or you're hosting an event. And if the cost exceeds your budget, then you need to prioritize. What is it that works? What is it that is worth it? What is it that will help me get to my goal better, right? And then you start with those and you allocate your resources. So it's a bit this process that you need to keep in mind. And just to give you an example, maybe to make it a bit more clear, here we have a SMART goal or objective, which is increase social media engagement by 30% in 3 months. SMART objective. Then you go to the tasks. Design 10 impactful social media posts. That's about $100 for the tools and the design support. Just an example. Run 2 targeted ads, $200. Host an Instagram live with a local activist. Maybe here you're not going to pay anything, but you're going to invest your time and everything. So we have a total of $300 for the 3 months. And now, before finishing, because I know that we are short on time as well, just a few communication tips. So one question that I get asked a lot is, Malak, should I go for emotions or reason in my communication? And my answer is that communication is like a cookie. I don't know if you like cookies, I do, but I know that if a cookie is too sweet, then it becomes overbearing. And if it's not sweet enough or a bit salty, then it's just plain disgusting. So the perfect cookie is when it's sweet and then you have a bit of saltiness where after the first bite, you just keep on eating them until you finish the pack. That's like communication. Balance is key. You want the emotion to create that relatability, that link, right, with the climate issue, with the issue you're talking about. But you also need the data to provide credibility for your story. Other communication, climate communication tips, fact check your information. There's a lot of information. Make sure that your source is reliable. Make the information clear and easy to understand, especially if you're talking to an audience that is not an expert in the domain. Make sure that they can understand it. Don't stay with the jargon. Make it relatable and actionable as well. And also, we're talking about climate here. Let's try not to fall into the doom and gloom. Talk about hope and solutions, but at the same time, don't fall into the greenwashing. Acknowledge that there are real issues out there that are difficult to solve. Localize your message. When people see that a global issue is reflected in their own community or locality, they relate to it more, they understand it more, and they're more willing to act on it. Be inclusive. Include the marginalized communities in your communication, but don't fall into tokenism. You want to make sure that they collaborate in that communication and that you're not just using them as a tool. And other general tips, stay clear, consistent, and unique. Here, just repeating things that I had said before, build authority. If there is a respected voice in your community or that you know in your network, try to have them back your statements. So just to close, bit in a nutshell, communication is an ongoing process that builds relationships, creates impact, and a well thought out strategy will give your project the clarity and consistency and power it needs to succeed. And I just want to end with this quote that I really like from Peter Drucker, which says, "The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said." So thank you so much. I'm just going to leave you here with this slide. So if you want to follow us on social media to stay up to date with the whole call for solution process, and also to know when we will actually launch the one-on-one support for your application. So yeah, thank you so much, and back to Lydia.
Thank you so much, Malak. Wow, this was a really important and insightful session, Malak. And as you all know, Malak is our communications analyst here at UNDP Rome Center, and that's the reason it reaches a lot of people. How this is the reason why the call is reaching most of you. So you see the importance of communication just from that. So Malak, let me ask you one question. There is a lot of questions. I think we have to summarize, compile them, and reach them on FAQ, but this one question is directly linked with your presentations. So one person asked how to create a content calendar, and if you have any recommendation on that, and do you have any frame that you recommend?
Yes, of course. So for the content calendar, you have a lot of templates that you can find online. Obviously, I can try to find some, and maybe we can put them on the platform for you to use. But also, yeah, they can be weekly, monthly, yearly, as I mentioned. The way you can go on about it is really, let's take the yearly one, for example. Think about when you have international days, or when you have national days, or when you have some events that are related to your projects that are happening. Start outlining those, and then think of a campaign that could make sense for your project, right? So to kind of use that global movement and link it back to your work. Now that's just one section of it. Then you need to kind of zoom in a bit. You go to the weekly. You're like, okay, I need to communicate every week, but I can't do it every day. So you say, okay, on Mondays, I'm going to share an explanation video on socials, for example. On Wednesdays, I'm going to share a blog post, right? Or maybe an interview article. And then you say, on Fridays, I'm going to run a poll, right, with my community to understand their position on certain things. And then, what is interesting is that that same poll, you can use it to then craft other content. So maybe you find that they're interested about a certain topic and you're like, great, that's giving me an idea to then write a blog post or create an explanation video or an infographic on something. So really try to do this. And also, I think one thing that's important is to think about how you use your energy. And by that, I mean that once you have a piece, you can repurpose that piece. So let me explain myself. When you have a long format piece, let's say a long video, let's say you shot this very long video, you went around getting testimonials, etc. What you can do with that same video, create small clips that you can reuse throughout different weeks. Or you have a written piece, a blog piece. You can take sections from that blog piece, turn them into an infographic, and then send back to the wider piece, to the main piece. So this is also something that you can use in your strategy. I hope I was clear in my answer.
Thank you so much, Malak. I see a lot of questions in regards to the call eligibility, call application process. All this will be answered on the FAQ page. So my colleagues will put it in the chat. So please take a look at our chat, see if you see Pavel or Roxani, copy all the links we have shared there. You will find these links very useful and important. And today's session, I am sure it's gonna help your application process. Carlotta's sessions touched on the template actually very well. So you saw that you're asked to present your baseline and your target, and then what is the output at the end, and then what are the activity breakdown. So please go, we will share the recording and the presentations. So please read them well, understand the concept before working on them. So understand what we mean by baseline, what we mean by output. And then when you put your communication budget, take things that Malak has shared with you into consideration. And I think you will find you don't have to like look for it at the end, like after you start your project, but you have to plan them ahead. So make sure you include a good communication budget, a Mindy budget. So I hope today's session was helpful, and we will also have one-to-one support coming up. So stay tuned for that. And next week we'll have thematic area focused deep dive webinar sessions. So on Monday we'll have on at the same time we'll have one on climate and health with UNDP Health. And then on Wednesday we will have one on climate peace and security. And on Friday we'll have on digital solutions. So stay tuned and make sure that you join all our webinar sessions. And finally, I would really like to say thank you so much for our interpreters for following us and for giving us their time, expertise, and support. This is very much appreciated. Thank you so much, Eloisa, Lara, Noor, Jordan, and Sylvia. Thank you. This was very helpful, and I hope everybody enjoyed today's session. Yeah, so make sure to go on our platform and you will find the recording and slides on the links that will be shared on the chat. That's it from me. And if there is anything else from the panelist side, I have to say goodbye for everyone, and we will see you on Monday.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
at the same time. Thank you. Ciao, everyone.